Hi, I'm Brad Sarin, Superintendent of the Sun Prairie Area School District. I'm joined by Dr. Nick Rykoff and Phil Fry here to present an informational screencast on the referendum of 2024. I'd like to start with gratitude. The Sun Prairie Area School District is exceptionally appreciative of our community and the support that all 10 of our municipalities and 79 square miles that the parents and taxpayers have given to the Sun Prairie Area School District. And we're going to want to continue that partnership into the future. And so Nick, if you could advance the slide. These are the essential questions for this screencast. What in the fiscal landscape has changed? And why do we have another question on the ballot for a referendum? And how would we utilize these funds to support the board's vision for the school district, which is really connected to the community's vision? And the truth is, there are things that we just didn't know in 2022, which was the last time that we went to referendum. We just didn't know that utilities were going to increase over 30%. We did not know that insurance was going to increase by over 20%. We did not know that the state biennial budget was not going to backfill for federal funds that were allocated to states or to keep up with inflation. And so we seek to develop and present the screencast in order to answer some of these complex questions. Go ahead. So this is the strategic framework that the Sun Prairie Area School District developed in conjunction with our community. And this represents the expectations of our community, including the fact that we have a commitment to equity and excellence through continuous improvement, that we have a culture of educational excellence, a culture of engagement and inclusion, and a culture of operational excellence. And the truth is that these are the things that the board is holding the administrative team accountable to achieve, and we want to. And this has worked for us over the last 3 years. Can you advance the slide? The work that we have done over the last 3 to 5 years have yielded results, which is great. We know that students feel safe in our schools. We know that our buildings are well maintained and provide an exceptional learning environment for our students. Our staff retention is very high. We're actually best in class for staff retention. Our staff satisfaction is very high at this point. Over 86% of our staff indicate that they're satisfied during the 23-24 school year. And we also know that schools within our 15 campuses with higher needs have more resources through equitable funding and staffing models. We also know that curriculum materials in the Sun Prairie Area School District have been updated and kept up with, and we've done so in collaborating with our staff. Students have had access to exceptional technology. We've had robust communication channels to make sure that our community is aware of our progress on our strategic plan. We're happy to report that the district maintains a high bond rating of AA. So when we do have to borrow, we are able to have access to very low interest rates. And we also continue our commitment to kids, serving over 5,500 meals daily to address food insecurity in our community. And the truth is that this is what the community has asked us to do on behalf of our students, on behalf of our families, and on behalf of our staff. And we want to continue working exceptionally hard in order to meet the community's expectations, which is exactly what the board is holding us accountable to achieve. Go ahead. And so our commitment is that we are committed to our students. We're committed to our staff. We're committed to our community. And this has been a bold vision, and our commitments that have yielded results in the past are something that we believe that we have to keep going and we have to keep making progress toward. And so this referendum is a part of the board's goal of coming back to the community, transparently communicating, and making sure that everybody understands what the expectations are, some of the results that we have been able to make, and then also what the future can yield here. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rykoff to begin the process of explaining some of the buckets of areas that we are looking to target with the referendum of 2024.
Thanks, Dr. Sarin. So as Brad said, to continue striving toward the vision of this community, the school board is placing an operational referendum on the ballot for November 2024. This is an operating referendum, not a capital referendum, which would be used to build schools or renovate schools. This operating referendum will be used to fund ongoing costs and needs in the school district. There's no interest payments because we're not borrowing money for an operating referendum. Instead, we're levying that amount in taxes each year to increase our overall revenue limit. The school board has discussed the amount of the referendum and targeted an amount of $25 million to be phased in over 5 years. Out of that $25 million, it'll be broken up into 3 areas. The first area of $4 million will be dedicated to providing educational programming to our students. $7 million will be allocated toward competitive staff compensation and benefits. And then 14 million will be allocated to stabilizing our operating expenses due to those inflationary costs that Dr. Sarin mentioned earlier. So we're going to go more in depth into each of these 3 areas in the upcoming slides here. The first section of the referendum is the $4 million to provide educational programming. And we really believe that we are, as a district, working to serve all students. Primarily, we've seen a lot of return on investment on our early learning, so our 4K and early childhood programming. We've also seen a lot of return on investment on the high school experience our juniors and seniors have as they get ready to transition out of high school. And we're looking to make sure we're meeting the needs of an increasingly diverse student body. When we talk about a return on investment on our early childhood and 4K programming, we are proud to say that 80% of our students who go through the 4K program enter 5-year-old kindergarten meeting or exceeding developmental targets for their age group. With the funds from the referendum, we would seek to build on this momentum and expand programming for our earliest learners. Likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, as our students are leaving us, we're really working to make sure that they are prepared for whatever the next step in life has for them. And so we've worked hard to grow dual enrollment programs, increase accessibility to advanced placement programs, and create innovative programs like the STEM Academy at Madison College. Altogether, these 3 programs have saved our families over $1 million in tuition because our students have been able to access those credit-bearing opportunities in high school before even going to college. And then as we think about meeting the needs of our diverse student body, we are projected to increase quite a few students as we go into the 24-25 school year. Projected enrollment right now is at 8,632 students. That would be the highest ever for the Sun Prairie Area School District. At the same time, we've been monitoring the number of families who qualify for free and reduced lunch. We've seen that grow up over 30%. As of May 2024, we were at over 34% of our students qualified for free and reduced lunch. That's also the highest ever for this district. We also are looking at the number of students moving in who are learning English. Our multilingual learners have increased by over 200 students since 2020. That is the highest level ever projected for 24-25 at 690 students as multilingual learners. And in addition, we've seen a large increase in the number of students who are experiencing homelessness. In the last few years, we've seen a surge. Over almost 300 students last year were experiencing homelessness and having housing insecurity impacting their ability to attend school. That's also the highest ever. So to meet these needs, as well as to prioritize our students' early learning and redefine the high school experience for our juniors and seniors, the school board has allocated $4 million from this 2024 referendum to increase educational programming to meet the needs of every student every day. The second segment of funds in this referendum are specifically targeted to competitive staff compensation and benefits. We know that our kids learn best when they're supported by the best staff, and we can recruit and retain those staff members if we pay them competitively and provide them with a competitive benefits package. As recent as 21-22, we were right in line with the Dane County average for particularly this shows teacher compensation. We invested funds from the 2019 referendum to really make sure that our teachers were earning competitive wages compared to other Dane County schools. And as recently as just a couple of years ago, we were right on line with that average, which you can see in the dark trend line on this graph. However, at the same time, we were going to referendum in 2022. Many other districts in Dane County were also going to referendum. And you can see from this chart that many of them, even though smaller than Sun Prairie, went to referendum for funds that were much larger than what we asked voters to consider in 2022. And so if you look at that far right column at the per pupil per year amount that some of these districts added to their revenue limit, Sun Prairie's averaged about $1,000 per student, but many other districts went to referenda for much more funds, which enabled them to really increase staff compensation and benefits in a way that Sun Prairie has not been able to. And this is illustrated by this graph, which shows the starting salary for teachers in a number of school districts in Dane County. Because we were conservative and took a cautious approach in 2022, asking only for funds that we needed to balance the budget. And other districts asked for funds that amounted to much more than that. They were able to invest money in staff compensation in ways that we were not. And we're now looking at one of the lowest starting salaries in Dane County for teachers. So upon successful passage of this referendum, the district would immediately allocate $3 million of this $7 million to teacher compensation specifically. That would bring our starting salary for teachers up to $51,402 for those with bachelor's degrees and a little bit more for those with master's degrees. The remaining $4 million would be held to fund future compensation and benefits adjustments for all staff. So this initial investment of $3 million would be for teaching staff, but the remaining $4 million would go to compensation and benefits of all of our staff to ensure that as the market changes and we have to stay competitive with other districts in Dane County, that we have funds to do that. I'm now going to turn it over to Phil Fry to talk about the third area of the referendum, stabilizing operating expenses.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, stabilizing operating expenses. So as Nick explained, there's $25 million for this referendum. 14 million of that would be to stabilize our operating expenses. And I'll explain how that works in the next few slides. But again, spread over the next 4 or 5 years to stabilize the budget. So the takeaway on this slide is with our revenue caps that all school districts in Wisconsin are under, started in 1993. When they started in 1993, they were tied to inflation. So if inflation went up 2%, school districts got to spend 2% more. Inflation went up 3%, school districts got to spend 3% more. That changed by the state legislature in 2010. They decoupled it from inflation to just a dollar amount. In some years, they gave $100 to school districts to spend. Some years they gave $0. Some years they gave $200. But that decoupling had a huge effect on the amount that we should have received under inflationary increases versus what the actual per pupil state funding was. So over time on this chart, those red bars that go down, you can see the cumulative effect of that to we get to the year 23-24, our last fiscal year, that the total dollar amount is $3,300 lower. So said in a different way, if our revenue cap went up by inflation, like it had done up until 2010, we would be able to spend $3,300 more per student. That $3,300, if you multiply it by roughly 8,500 students, that's about $27 million more that our district would have to spend if we just got inflationary increases. And I think most people, when you talk to them, think it makes sense that school districts should increase their budget by inflation, and not increasing it by inflation is where we're at with our budget right now. Part of that, as I said, the state of Wisconsin has decoupled it from inflation. In this chart, or this table, shows that in 2002, the state of Wisconsin was 11th in the nation in what we spent on public education on a per pupil basis. Just 20 years later, we've gone from 11th in the nation down to 25th. So we've had a dramatic decrease in the amount of funding that school districts have spent on, or the state of Wisconsin has spent on school districts. And that's not only impacting Sun Prairie School District, and it also impacts many, many rural districts in the state, especially districts that are maybe declining enrollment. The rural funding of school districts compared to the nation, we're the 11th lowest for rural districts. So when you put that all together, as we've talked about, some high inflationary needs the last few years, the state of Wisconsin not funding versus what they should be. As Brad mentioned in the opening, there's a lot of federal dollars that we did receive over the last 3 years, but the state has not backfilled that. So because of that, we have enrollment and budget projections for the next 5 years. And what this chart shows is both the projections that we use show that within 5 years, if we don't balance the budget or do an operating referendum, which is what we're talking about today, that we will be facing $11-12 million deficits, and that deficit will only grow over time. So that is this is really the reason that we're asking the voters to be informed about the referendum and understand what the consequences are if the referendum doesn't pass. And that's what this slide shows. So what, the question might be, what does a $14 million reduction look for the Sun Prairie School District? So for illustrative purposes only, we put this chart together. There'd have to be a very detailed study on the budget to areas that we could reduce, and that would happen if the referendum fails. But to give an illustration of what a $14 million referendum or reduction looks like, we basically have about 1,300 staff members in the district. And to get us to that $14 million target, we would have to reduce staff by about 182 staff members. Then we'd still have to reduce other areas of the budget, department budgets like buildings and grounds and technology, athletics, capital projects, the school building budgets, and summer school. All those budgets would also be impacted to get to that estimated, again, $14 million reduction in our budget. So as we've talked about, we are going to referendum. We are not doing this alone. In fact, I think across the state, there's over 60, 70, 80 districts going to referendum. Just in Dane County, we've listed the districts. So DeForest, Madison, McFarland, and Waunakee are going to referendums. You can see the amounts for each of those districts, their enrollments, and then what it is on a per pupil basis, which is also important. As Nick pointed out, our referendum amount might look large, but you also have to remember we have over 8,400 students. So again, third part of the referendum is to stabilize our operating expenses. That amount is 14 million. That would be spread over the next 4 years. Each year there'd be a different amount that would help balance the budget. So this is what would be on the ballot. So when people get their absentee ballot or go into the ballot booth on November 5th, they'll see this resolution. I won't read all the words to you because it's a little bit long, but basically it says to exceed the revenue limit. So this is, again, something that by state statute, we have to ask the voters to do. By state statute, you can see that 121.91 by $25 million starting in the 24-25 year for reoccurring purposes consisting of expenses to provide for staff compensation, which Nick talked about that, for educational programming, again, Nick talked about that, and to maintain operations, which I've just spent a few minutes talking about how that would help us maintain our operations. So as I said, the money would be phased in over the next 5 years. The first phase in would be this $3 million in this fiscal year. So we're already in the 24-25 fiscal year. We would use $3 million, as Nick explained, right off the bat if the referendum passes, to increase teachers' compensation. Then the remaining 4 years, we'd take that 22 million and split it over the 4 years and use it depending on how much state funding we get from the budget, inflation, and mill rate management. But basically that 22 million would be phased in over the next 4 years. So definitely a part of the referendum presentation is what does that mean for the taxpayers? And just want to explain a little bit what mill rate is. So when you hear mill rate or tax rate, that's taking our total levy, the amount of money that we need to support the district from taxes, divided by our equalized value, the property value of our district equals your mill rate. So last year, fiscal year that just ended, we had a total levy of just under $77 million divided by our $7.8 billion of property value means our mill rate last year was $9.86 per $1,000 of value. So if you had a $300,000 home, you can figure out what your school property tax would be by multiplying it, dividing it by 1,000, and then multiplying that by $9.86. So property values do change every year. There's increases in property value just for your house, just because of usually inflationary, and there's been some large increases in assessed values over the last few years. So that's one way that property values grow. The second way is really what helps our district out is we have a lot of net new construction. So that's could be new businesses building, new apartments, new houses going up. That new construction helps spread out the property tax impact, and especially helps take it off the burden of existing owners. And again, new property coming in helps pay for this too. So this chart just explaining, or not explaining, but showing what the district's mill rate has been over the last 5 years. So going back to 2019-20, our mill rate was 1306. You can see we've had a very steady decrease of our mill rate to, again, that $9.86 that I mentioned a few slides ago. And on top of that, remember that we did pass a referendum in 2022 to exceed the revenue cap, and you can see that the mill rate actually has gone down since then. So the other thing is we hear from property tax owners, which I'm one of those, and just that people feel, taxes have increased quite a bit over time. So I've actually done quite a bit of studying of tax bills. Just curious what the Sun Prairie tax has done from 2023 going back 3 years to 2020. So I looked at the school portion. The property taxes is made up of school portion, your local municipality, Dane County, and MATC. But obviously the school district, we just have control over our portion of that. So when I looked at those tax bills, the average Sun Prairie area school district tax has decreased over those 3 years. You can always find your property tax information if you didn't keep your records. Go to Access Dane, which is linked in here, or just give me a call and I can help you look at your tax bill. But again, in general, the tax bills that we've looked at, the school tax over the last 3 years has decreased. And this chart is showing historical mill rate and then the projected mill rate. So this one actually goes back 10 years. You can see 10 years ago, we had a mill rate of $13.50. 23-24, we had a mill rate of $9.86, which I've talked about quite a bit. That was our last year's mill rate. And then what would the mill rate be if our referendum passes? The first year, you can see it jumps up to 1016, then goes up to 1074, and then we have it stabilizing at $11.30. And the reason we can do that is we can really work with our debt management, our financial advisors to zone in on a mill rate. And we feel comfortable that the mill rate would be $11.30 for those last 3 years. So how that looks on a little bit different viewpoint, again, that the first year on the 24 tax bill, the mill rate would go up 30 cents, then 58 cents the second year, then 56 cents the third year. And then after the third year, there'd be no tax increase from the referendum. So on a dollar basis, on a $300,000 house, the total increase on the mill rate is $1.44. And to put that to dollars, that for each year, the first year, the added increase would be $90. The second year would be an added increase of $174. Third year would be an added increase of $168 for a total increase of $432 by the time we get to the third year. So again, have any questions about how that works out, just give me a call. I'd be happy to explain that some more.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Nick. When the Board of Education decided to put this question to the ballot, it did so and provided promises to our community. And so the board feels very strongly that the district will not seek additional operational funds during the duration of the 5-year roll-in of this referendum, and that would be through the 28-29 school year. The board feels that the district will not levy the full taxing authority if the monies and revenue isn't needed. And so in the case that the state of Wisconsin has some type of increase to the budget for the Sun Prairie Area School District, and through the budgeting process and what Nick and Phil and I present to the board, if we don't need that taxing authority, we won't use it. The board has also promised that we will not use referendum funds to significantly expand staffing, excluding enrollment staffing, and instead we will use funds to support our current staff. And last, that the district continue its commitment to improve results. We are all here to unlock the potential of our students and to support them to reach their dreams. That's why this is about commitments to students, to our staff, and our community. And so I'll end with gratitude, just like I started with gratitude. We are really thankful for our partnership with our community. We believe that the school district is a part of the reason that the Sun Prairie community thrives, and that we want this place to be a place where people want to locate to and to raise their families and to develop a business and to really thrive as families and a community. And we also believe that the reason that property values are increasing in the Sun Prairie Area School District is in part because of the quality of the schools. And so I'll end, like I said, with gratitude. And we thank you for watching the screencast. And as always, if you have questions, or if a colleague or a neighbor has questions, please feel free to have them reach out. Nick and I and Phil and any one of our board members are here to answer questions. And thank you.